"I'll open my legs for a roof and food," the Apache woman offered the widowed farmer on Christmas. The cold had come early that year. Snow lay thick on the ground, turning the small farm into a world of white silence. The wind howled through the bare trees, rattling the roof of the farmer's house, and the icy air made every step outside feel like walking through a frozen river. Inside, the fire sputtered in the hearth, struggling to keep warmth in the small, worn room. Samuel Turner, the widowed farmer, sat near the fire, rubbing his hands together for warmth. His eyes, tired and lined from months of worry, watched his 2 children huddled under a thin blanket. Emily, his eldest at 12, tried to keep her younger brother, Tommy, from shivering, but her own small body shook with cold. Their mother had passed almost a year ago, leaving Samuel alone to manage the farm and care for the children. Each day was a battle against hunger, frost, and despair. He had done everything he could. He had chopped firewood until his arms ached, tried to repair the roof that leaked whenever the snow melted slightly, and rationed the small store of food left from last harvest. Yet with the snow falling earlier than usual, he knew the supplies would not last long. He had been praying for help, though he did not expect it to come in any form. That evening, as Samuel sat quietly, listening to the wind, a knock came at the door. He froze. At this hour in this storm, no neighbor would dare walk across the frozen fields. He stood slowly, taking the rusty old rifle from its hook by the wall. "Who's there?" he called, trying to keep his voice steady. A small, trembling voice answered. "Please, sir, I'm lost. I have no home." Samuel's grip on the rifle loosened slightly. He opened the door just enough to peek outside. Standing in the snow was a woman, her clothing thin and soaked from the snow. Her hair was tangled and wet, and her eyes, dark and wary, looked at him with a mixture of fear and desperation. She was clearly struggling to survive. "Come in," Samuel said, his voice softer now. He moved aside, letting her step inside. She hesitated but entered, shivering, and her teeth chattered. Thank you," she whispered, her voice almost breaking. She sank to the floor near the fire, trying to warm herself. Samuel took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "You're lucky you found this place," he said. "It's not much, but you'll be out of the snow here." She nodded, grateful, but her eyes never left his face. Samuel noticed the lines of worry and exhaustion etched into her expression. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, but the hardships she had faced were clear. "My name is Samuel," he said, trying to break the silence. "And these are my children, Emily and Tommy." The children, curious but cautious, peeked out from under the blanket. The woman offered a small, tired smile. I'm Aeon," she said softly. I don't have anywhere to go. I've been walking for days. I didn't know I'd survive the night." Samuel nodded. He understood fear and desperation. The farm had been merciless, and he had felt that same despair more than once since his wife's passing. He glanced at the small cupboard and saw the few potatoes, a little flour, and dried meat. It wasn't much, but it could keep her alive for a day or two. "Sit by the fire," he said. "Eat something. You need your strength." Aeon hesitated but obeyed. She took the food he offered, eating quickly but quietly. The warmth of the fire and the first real meal she had had in days made her eyes glisten with tears. Samuel watched her, unsure how to feel. She was a stranger, yet she reminded him of the struggles he had faced. And then, unexpectedly, she said something that made his heart stop. I'll do anything to stay here for the night," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the wind. "I have nothing, no food, no home. I can't survive outside." Samuel frowned. There was a tension in her words that made him uneasy. He could see the desperation, the fear that came from being alone in a world so cruel. But he also saw a kind of courage. She had walked through the storm to reach him. I can give you shelter and food," he said slowly. "But you have to understand, this is not a place for tricks or games. This is my home, and I have to keep my children safe." Aeon nodded quickly. "I understand," she said. I promise, I need warmth, I need food." Samuel felt the weight of her presence in his home. The snowstorm was only going to get worse, and turning her away would almost certainly mean death for her. He sighed and looked at his children. Emily's small face was worried, but there was no protest. They could sense his decision. "You can stay," he said finally, "for tonight at least." Relief washed over Aeon's face. She dropped to her knees, bowing her head slightly. Thank you," she said, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to repay you." Samuel shook his head. "Just survive the night, that's enough." As the evening wore on, they ate together, shared the warmth of the fire, and spoke quietly. Aeon told stories of her life, how she had grown up in a small Apache village, how her family had been forced to leave, and how she had wandered through harsh lands to survive. Samuel listened, moved by her courage and resilience. The children, Emily and Tommy, slowly warmed up to her. Emily asked questions about the land she had seen, and Aeon answered, her voice soft but strong. For a while, the house was filled with something other than fear and cold. It was filled with the faint glow of connection, understanding, and shared humanity. But the storm outside reminded them of the danger beyond the walls. The wind rattled the windows, snow piled against the doors, and the roof groaned under the weight. Samuel realized that tonight they were all at the mercy of the elements. He glanced at Aeon and saw her looking into the fire, shivering but composed. Her presence had changed something in the house. It was no longer just a place of survival. It had become a place of shared struggle, where each of them had to rely on the other to make it through the night. As midnight approached, Samuel sat back and looked at the snow-covered world outside. He thought about how life had forced him to face despair and loss. He thought about his wife, about the promises he had made, and about the responsibility he carried for his children. And he thought about Aeon, a stranger who had arrived at his door in the harshest of times. He realized that sometimes survival required trust. Sometimes it required opening one's home, heart, and life to someone unexpected. And for the first time in many months, he felt a small glimmer of hope. Outside, the snow continued to fall, relentless and blinding. Inside, the fire crackled, and the small house held together against the storm. Samuel, his children, and Aeon would face the long, cold night together. And in that shared struggle, there was something quiet, something powerful, a sense of humanity that no storm could erase. By dawn, the wind had slowed slightly, but the world outside was still blanketed in white. Samuel looked at Aeon, who had fallen asleep near the fire, exhausted from her journey. He felt a strange mix of relief, protectiveness, and gratitude. She had come seeking shelter, and in doing so, she had brought a reminder that even in the harshest winters, human kindness could survive. And as he watched her sleep, he promised himself one thing. No matter what, he would protect his children, and he would honor the trust of the woman who had walked through a snowstorm to find warmth and safety in his home. The storm was far from over, but for one night in a small farmhouse in the frozen countryside, they had found a fragile peace. A night where fear had not triumphed, where kindness had held the fire against the cold, and where 3 lives had intersected in a moment that neither time nor snow could erase. The morning light crept through the frost-covered windows, casting a soft glow across the small farmhouse. Outside, the snow lay thick and undisturbed, turning the world into a quiet, white blanket. Inside, the warmth of the fire slowly chased away the chill, and Samuel Turner stirred from a restless sleep. He looked around the room at his children, Emily and Tommy, who were still asleep under the thin blankets. Their faces were pale from the cold, but peaceful now. For a moment, he felt a rare calm. The storm had passed for the night, and for the first time in many weeks, he allowed himself a small breath of relief. But then he looked at Aeon, the young woman who had arrived so unexpectedly the night before. She was awake, sitting quietly near the fire, her hands wrapped around a tin cup of warm broth. Her eyes were distant, thoughtful, but there was a faint spark of determination that had not faded. Samuel felt the weight of her presence in the room. He remembered her words from the previous night, the desperation in her voice, the offer she had made in her fear and hunger. He had accepted her into the house, yes, but her words lingered in his mind. She had walked through the storm, risking everything to survive. And in doing so, she had crossed a line of trust and morality, testing him in a way he had never expected. He shook his head slightly and moved toward the fire, sitting on the edge of the small wooden chair. He did not speak immediately, letting the silence stretch between them. Aeon noticed and gave a faint, respectful nod, waiting for him to find the right words. "You were very brave to come here last night," Samuel said finally. His voice was calm but measured. "Most people wouldn't have made it through that storm. I admire your courage." Aeon looked up at him, and for the first time her eyes softened. "I didn't have a choice," she said quietly. "If I stayed out there, I would have frozen. I know it was a lot to ask. I only wanted to survive." Samuel nodded slowly. He understood all too well the harshness of survival. He had faced cold winters before, always relying on his wits and stubbornness to keep his children alive. He could see in Aeon's eyes the same determination that had kept him going through months of grief and struggle. "I know," he said finally, "and that's why you have to understand something. This is my home, and my children are my responsibility. I can give you food and shelter, yes, but nothing else will be allowed that would put them in danger or make our lives harder." Aeon lowered her gaze, her hands trembling slightly around the cup. "I understand," she said softly. "I promise. I only want warmth and food. I will not cause any trouble." Samuel watched her carefully. He wanted to believe her, and part of him did. But he also knew that desperation could drive people to make choices they would not normally consider. He sighed, realizing the delicate balance he now had to maintain. He would provide for her, yes, but he would have to watch closely to ensure that her presence did not disrupt the fragile stability he had fought to maintain for his children. The day began slowly. The snowstorm had passed, but the world outside remained harsh and unyielding. Samuel set about the morning chores, feeding the chickens, checking the small herd of cows, and chopping wood for the fire. Aeon watched quietly at first, then offered to help. She carried water from the well, gathered kindling, and helped prepare breakfast. Her movements were careful, precise, and respectful, as if she understood the unspoken rules of his home. Emily and Tommy watched her with curiosity. Emily, older and more perceptive, asked questions about her life, and Aeon answered with stories of the land she had traveled, the challenges she had faced, and the small victories she had found along the way. The children listened intently, their eyes wide with wonder and fascination. For a moment, the cold outside seemed less threatening, and the farmhouse became a place of shared stories, laughter, and learning. But Samuel could not let himself relax completely. He was aware of the tension that lingered, subtle but present, between them. Aeon's offer the night before had been born of desperation, yes, but it had also revealed the depths of human fear and the lengths someone would go to survive. He had accepted her for the night, but now, in the daylight, he wrestled with questions of morality, trust, and propriety. He remembered his wife, Mary, and how she had always guided him with a sense of right and wrong. Her voice seemed to echo in his mind as he considered the situation. She would have reminded him that kindness did not mean weakness, that helping someone in need was noble, but that protecting his children and his home must always come first. Samuel took a deep breath and decided that he would treat Aeon with respect and fairness. He would provide for her needs, yes, but he would also teach her that trust had to be earned and that survival was not just about hunger. It was about understanding the world, following rules, and acting with integrity. As the day went on, Samuel noticed changes in Aeon. Her movements became more confident, her voice stronger when she spoke, and her eyes brighter with the small triumphs of completing chores and helping the children. She seemed to understand the delicate balance of their lives together, respecting boundaries while contributing to the household. By late afternoon, the snow outside began to settle into a gentle silence. The world was still cold, but inside the farmhouse, the warmth of the fire, the smell of cooking food, and the presence of shared effort made it feel almost like a haven. Samuel, exhausted from the day's work, sat down beside Aeon near the fire. "You've done well today," he said quietly. I didn't expect you to manage so much. The children and I are grateful for your help." Aeon smiled faintly, a mix of pride and relief. "I wanted to help," she said. I've been alone for so long. It's hard to trust anyone, but I can see that you are honest, and your children, they are kind. It makes me feel safe." Samuel looked at her and saw the truth in her words. He realized that her arrival had brought more than just a challenge. It had brought an opportunity to connect, to teach, and perhaps even to heal some of the invisible wounds that lingered in his own heart. As evening approached, Samuel prepared a small meal for them all. The children ate with renewed energy, their laughter filling the room for the first time in weeks. Aeon helped serve the food, and Samuel found himself watching her with a growing sense of respect. She was strong, brave, and determined, qualities that could not be ignored. After the meal, they sat together by the fire. Samuel spoke to the children about the importance of kindness and helping those in need, using Aeon's story as an example. Emily and Tommy listened intently, their young minds absorbing lessons of empathy, courage, and resilience. Aeon sat quietly, listening to Samuel's words. She felt a sense of belonging that she had not known in years. For the first time, she did not feel like an outsider, like someone who had to fend for herself alone. Here, she was part of a small, fragile family struggling together against the harshness of the world. But even as warmth and trust grew, the shadow of uncertainty remained. Samuel knew that the days ahead would be difficult. Food supplies were low, the winter could still bring more storms, and the world outside their small farmhouse was unkind and unforgiving. He had taken a risk in allowing Aeon into his home, and he had to be vigilant to ensure that their fragile peace was not disrupted. Yet, as he looked at Aeon and the children, he felt a cautious hope. Survival was not just about enduring the cold or finding food. It was about understanding one another, working together, and trusting in the basic goodness of people. And for now, in this small house in the middle of a snow-covered world, that hope was enough. Night fell again, bringing with it the silence of winter. The wind whispered against the walls, but inside the fire glowed warmly, casting light on the small group huddled together. Samuel watched Aeon as she helped tuck the children into bed, her movements gentle and careful. He felt a mixture of gratitude and admiration. She had come to him out of desperation, yes, but she had proven herself trustworthy and capable. As he lay down that night, Samuel reflected on the day. He realized that his initial judgment of her had been harsh, born from fear and the need to protect his children. But now he understood that survival required more than just caution. It required compassion, understanding, and sometimes the courage to open one's home and heart to someone in need. For Aeon, the night was a time of quiet reflection as well. She had come to Samuel's house fearing judgment and rejection, but she had found kindness and safety instead. She thought of her long journey through the snow, of the cold nights spent alone, and of the warmth she had found here. It was a small comfort, but it was enough to give her strength for the days ahead. In the quiet of the farmhouse, with the fire crackling and the snow falling softly outside, a fragile bond had formed. It was a bond built on trust, respect, and the shared struggle of survival. Samuel, his children, and Aeon had faced the harshness of winter together, and in doing so, they had discovered that even in the coldest, most desperate times, human kindness could endure. And as sleep claimed them one by one, The small farmhouse felt less like a shelter from the storm and more like a place where hope could take root, even in the harshest winter. The morning broke slowly, gray and heavy with the promise of more snow. Outside, the wind still moaned through the skeletal trees, and a thick layer of ice coated the fields and fences. Samuel Turner stirred from a restless sleep, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on him more than ever. The previous day had been difficult but manageable, yet he knew that winter was far from over. Emily and Tommy were awake, rubbing their eyes and shivering under the thin blankets. Aeon had already started a small fire in the kitchen stove and was preparing a simple breakfast of porridge and bread. Samuel watched her quietly for a moment, appreciating the quiet efficiency with which she moved. Her presence had become a part of their daily rhythm, and though he remained cautious, he could not deny that her help had been invaluable. After breakfast, Samuel bundled the children in thick coats and sent them outside to feed the chickens and check on the small herd of cows. The snow was deep, and the cold bit at their faces, but the children moved with determination, just as he had when he was a boy. Aeon followed them, helping to carry water and gather firewood, her steps careful but sure. As they worked, the wind picked up again, stronger this time, carrying icy flakes that stung their cheeks. Samuel felt a shiver run down his spine, realizing that the storm was far from over. He looked at Aeon and the children and felt the familiar tightness of worry in his chest. They could survive a night or two like this, but prolonged storms could be deadly. He motioned for Aeon to come closer. "We need to be careful," he said, his voice firm but calm. "The snow is piling up and the wind is picking up speed. If we don't manage the animals and the fire, we could have serious trouble tonight." Aeon nodded, her dark eyes serious. "I understand," she said. "I'll help however I can." For the rest of the morning, they worked together in silence, communicating through gestures and brief words. Samuel chopped wood while Aeon carried it to the stove. Emily fed the chickens, and Tommy made sure the cows had enough water. It was exhausting work, and the cold seemed to seep into their bones no matter how much they moved. But despite the difficulty, there was a rhythm to their labor, a silent understanding that their survival depended on each other. By midday, the storm began to worsen. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets, and the wind roared against the roof and walls. The small farmhouse groaned under the weight of ice and snow, and Samuel realized that they needed to secure the building and stock up on supplies before nightfall. "We need to bring in more firewood," he said, glancing at the small pile outside. "And we have to make sure the roof can hold the snow. If it collapses, we'll have bigger problems than the cold." Aeon nodded, determination etched on her face. "I can help with the roof," she said. "We need to be quick before the snow keeps falling." Together, they worked to clear the roof, shoveling snow carefully while the wind tried to push them back. The children watched from inside, worried but unable to help in the dangerous conditions. Samuel felt the sting of snow in his eyes, the sharp pain of frozen fingers, but he did not stop. Aeon's presence gave him strength. She worked silently, efficiently, never complaining, never faltering. Hours passed, and by late afternoon, they had managed to remove enough snow to make the roof safer and brought in several more logs for the fire. Samuel felt a cautious sense of relief. The immediate danger was less, but the storm showed no signs of stopping. He knew they still had a long night ahead. As they sat down to rest, Aeon pulled her coat tighter around herself, shivering despite the fire. "This storm, it's stronger than I've ever seen," she said softly. Samuel nodded. "Yes, but we've done well so far. The house is secure, the animals are safe, and we're all still here. That counts for a lot." The children listened quietly, Emily glancing at Aeon with admiration. "You're very brave," she said. "You came here in the snowstorm and helped us." Aeon smiled faintly. "I had to survive," she said, "but I also wanted to help you. You've been kind to me, and I want to repay that kindness in any way I can." Samuel felt a warmth in his chest at her words. It was one thing to survive alone, but it was another to survive together, supporting each other. He realized that Aeon's presence was no longer just a matter of shelter or food. It had become a part of the family's fight against the winter. As evening approached, the wind grew fiercer, and snow drifted against the windows. Samuel knew that the night would be long and difficult. He instructed the children to stay close to the fire and not wander, while he and Aeon prepared extra blankets and stacked wood by the stove. The hours passed slowly. Outside the storm raged, and inside the fire crackled steadily. Aeon shared stories of her travels, of small villages she had passed through, and the hardships she had faced along the way. The children listened in awe, their eyes wide as they imagined distant lands and snowy mountains. Samuel watched her with a mix of admiration and caution. He realized that her stories were more than entertainment. They were lessons in courage, resilience, and survival. He thought about how much his children could learn from her, not just about the world but about the strength that comes from facing adversity. As night fell, the storm intensified. Snow drifted against the doors, and the wind howled like a living thing. Samuel could feel the house shivering under the pressure, and he knew that they would have to be careful to keep the fire going and the animals safe. "We need to stay alert tonight," he said quietly to Aeon. "If the wind shifts or the snow piles higher, we'll have to react quickly." Aeon nodded, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I'll stay awake with you," she said. "We can take turns resting if needed. I want to help keep everyone safe." The night stretched on, long and quiet except for the roar of the storm outside. Samuel took turns checking the fire, the children, and the animals, while Aeon helped him keep watch. They spoke in whispers, conserving energy and warmth, and in those quiet hours, a deeper bond began to form. It was not a bond of friendship yet, nor of family. It was something stronger, something born of shared struggle and mutual reliance. Samuel realized that trust was growing between them, fragile but undeniable. He saw it in Aeon's steady hands, her careful attention to the children, and the calm determination in her eyes. By the time dawn approached, the storm had slowed slightly, leaving a soft, silent world blanketed in white. Samuel sat by the fire, exhausted but relieved. The house had survived, the children were safe, and Aeon had proven herself invaluable. Emily and Tommy stirred, rubbing their eyes as they looked at the woman who had become their unexpected companion. "You stayed up all night?" Emily asked in surprise. Aeon smiled faintly. "Yes," she said. "We had to make sure everything was okay." Samuel felt a swell of gratitude. She had come to them in desperation, yes, but she had stayed not just for herself, but for them. In that act, she had shown a strength of character that went beyond survival. It was courage, loyalty, and compassion. He realized something important as he looked at her. Survival was never just about food, shelter, or warmth. It was about people, about trust, about working together to face the challenges of the world. And for the first time in weeks, he felt a spark of hope that they could endure whatever winter threw at them. The children joined them by the fire, their faces bright with curiosity and admiration. They listened to Aeon's stories of courage and survival, asking questions and imagining themselves in distant lands. For a moment, the harshness of the winter seemed less threatening, replaced by the warmth of connection and understanding. Samuel knew that the days ahead would still be difficult. The storm could return, supplies were limited, and the world outside was unforgiving. But for now, they had each other. And sometimes, he thought, that was enough to face even the coldest, darkest nights. As the first rays of sunlight touched the snow outside, Samuel felt a quiet determination settle in his heart. They had survived the storm together, and in doing so, they had discovered a new kind of strength, one born not from individual effort alone, but from unity, trust, and the willingness to help one another. Aeon looked at the children and smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged somewhere, even if only temporarily. She had come seeking shelter and warmth, but she had found something else as well: the fragile beginnings of trust, hope, and human connection. And as the farmhouse stood against the lingering cold, Samuel, Aeon, and the children faced the new day together, ready to confront whatever challenges winter would bring. They had survived the storm, yes, but more importantly, they had survived together. And in that survival, they had discovered something stronger than fear or despair, something that could carry them through the long, harsh winter yet to come. The snow outside had settled into a soft, heavy silence, but the wind still whispered threats through the trees. Inside the farmhouse, the fire crackled warmly, casting a golden light across the room. Samuel Turner sat near the stove, keeping a careful eye on the children as they played quietly with small toys Emily had saved from last Christmas. The storm had passed, but he knew better than to assume that winter's trials were over. Aeon moved around the small kitchen with a calm efficiency, chopping vegetables and preparing a simple stew from the meager supplies they had. Her hands were steady, her movements precise, and Samuel could see the determination in her eyes. She had already proven herself a capable helper and a reliable presence in the house. But today, a new challenge would test all of them in ways they could not yet foresee. The first sign came when Tommy ran in from the yard, snow clinging to his coat and hat. "Daddy, the cows, they're stuck in the snow," he shouted, his voice filled with panic. Samuel leapt to his feet, his heart pounding. "Which ones? Show me." Emily grabbed his arm. "I think it's Bess and the calf," she said. "They couldn't get back to the barn." Samuel frowned, realizing the danger immediately. The snowdrifts outside were high and the cold was biting. If the cows stayed out too long, they could freeze or injure themselves trying to escape. Without thinking, he grabbed his coat and boots, motioning for Aeon to come with him. "Be careful," he warned the children. "Stay inside and keep the fire going." Aeon followed him without hesitation, her face set in determination. The wind bit at their faces, and the snow crunched loudly beneath their boots. The cows were trapped in a drift, frightened and panicked, trying to find footing in the icy snow. Samuel moved quickly, calming them with soft words, while Aeon helped to clear the snow and guide the animals toward the barn. It was grueling work, and the wind seemed determined to push them back at every step. Samuel could feel his muscles straining, his breath coming in short gasps, but he refused to stop. He glanced at Aeon, who was equally focused, and a sense of gratitude mixed with respect swelled inside him. She had come to him in desperation, yes, but now she was proving her courage in ways that went far beyond survival. By the time the cows were safely in the barn, soaked and shivering but unharmed, both Samuel and Aeon were exhausted. They trudged back to the farmhouse, snow clinging to their coats and boots, hearts still racing from the adrenaline of the rescue. Inside, Emily and Tommy ran to them, faces full of concern and relief. "You did it," Emily exclaimed. "They're safe." Samuel nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yes, but we have to be more careful. The snow can be dangerous and we can't risk the animals or ourselves without thinking ahead." Aeon looked at the children and smiled faintly. "You both did your best too," she said. "Helping us even from inside counts. You showed courage." The children beamed, proud of their small contribution. Samuel felt a warmth spread in his chest. Despite the harsh winter, despite the challenges, their small family had faced danger together and come through stronger. But the day's challenges were far from over. As Samuel prepared to check the roof for more snow accumulation, Aeon approached him with a concerned look. "The roof still looks weak in some spots," she said. "If more snow comes tonight, it could collapse." Samuel nodded grimly. "You're right. We need to reinforce it before the next storm." They worked side by side, moving planks and shoveling snow carefully. The cold was relentless, and Samuel's muscles ached, but the sense of teamwork made the burden lighter. Aeon's presence was steadying, a reminder that survival was never a solo effort. It required trust, cooperation, and shared responsibility. By late afternoon, the roof was secure, and the fire in the stove burned steadily. Samuel motioned for Aeon to rest, but she shook her head. "I'm fine," she said. "We still need to make sure the animals and the children are ready if the storm returns." Samuel could not argue. She was right. Winter had tested them once, and it could test them again at any moment. They prepared extra blankets for the children, rationed the remaining food carefully, and double-checked the barn and water supplies. The house was as ready as it could be, but Samuel knew that preparation alone could not guarantee safety. Survival required vigilance, courage, and trust in one another. As evening fell, the sky darkened with clouds, signaling the return of another snowstorm. Samuel gathered the children near the fire while Aeon checked the windows and doors, ensuring that the wind could not breach the small farmhouse. The storm outside was fierce, the wind howling like a living creature, snow striking the windows in icy bursts. Emily looked up at Samuel with wide eyes. "Daddy, do you think we'll be safe?" Samuel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Yes, Emily, we've prepared as best we can, and we have each other. That's the most important thing." Aeon sat beside them, her presence calm and steady. "We'll face it together," she said softly. "We've made it this far. We can make it through tonight too." The hours passed slowly, the storm raging outside as they huddled near the fire. Samuel and Aeon took turns keeping watch, checking the children and the fire, and making sure the animals in the barn were safe. The tension in the house was thick, but so was a sense of unity. They were no longer just a farmer, a woman, and two children. They were a small team, relying on each other in ways that went beyond words. At one point, a loud crack echoed through the house, and Samuel jumped to his feet. A heavy branch had fallen against the roof, shaking the small farmhouse. He rushed to the window and saw the branch frozen in place, snow piling around it. "We need to clear it first thing in the morning," he said, his voice tense but controlled. "It could cause damage if we don't." Aeon nodded, her face serious. "We'll handle it together," she said. "No one will be hurt." The storm continued through the night, but the farmhouse held firm. Samuel marveled at Aeon's composure and the children's bravery. Emily and Tommy had learned more about courage and teamwork in a single day than he could have taught them in months. And he realized something profound. Trust had grown between them all, fragile but undeniable. By morning, the storm had weakened. The world outside was a harsh, frozen landscape, but the farmhouse stood strong. Samuel and Aeon worked together to clear the roof and remove the fallen branch, while the children helped with small tasks, their energy renewed by sleep and safety. As they finished, Samuel looked at Aeon, gratitude evident in his eyes. "You've been incredible," he said. "I don't know what I would have done without your help." Aeon smiled faintly, her breath visible in the cold morning air. "We've all helped each other," she said. "That's why we survived." Samuel nodded, realizing the truth in her words. Survival was not about one person. It was about everyone working together, trusting one another, and facing challenges as a team. And in that understanding, a bond had formed between them, stronger than fear, stronger than the cold, stronger than the isolation of the winter landscape. The children gathered around the fire later that day, their faces bright with curiosity and admiration. Emily asked Aeon about her life, about the places she had traveled and the hardships she had endured. Aeon spoke gently, weaving lessons of resilience and courage into her stories. Tommy listened quietly, absorbing every word. Samuel watched, feeling a rare sense of peace. He realized that Aeon had become more than a helper. She was a teacher, a protector, and a friend. And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe that they could endure the winter, not just survive, but grow stronger through it. As evening fell again, Samuel sat by the fire, the children asleep in their beds and Aeon beside him. The storm had tested them, challenged them, and yet they had faced it together. In the quiet of the farmhouse, he felt a sense of hope that he had not known in months. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, and snow drifted lazily across the fields. But inside, the warmth of the fire and the strength of trust kept the cold at bay. Samuel realized that the hardships of winter had taught them something valuable, that courage, compassion, and unity could endure even in the harshest conditions. Aeon looked at him and smiled faintly. "We've made it this far," she said. "We can handle whatever comes next." Samuel nodded. "Yes," he said. "Together we can face anything." And in that small farmhouse, against the backdrop of a frozen world, the bond between Samuel, Aeon, and the children grew stronger, tested by snow, wind, and fear, but unbroken. They had survived the storm, and in doing so they had discovered a new strength, born not just of necessity, but of trust, courage, and the quiet power of human connection. The morning sun peeked weakly over the snow-covered hills, casting pale light across the farmhouse. The storm had passed entirely, leaving a quiet world blanketed in white. Samuel Turner stood by the window, watching the soft sparkle of snow in the morning light. For the first time in weeks, the world outside seemed calm, almost peaceful. Inside, Aeon moved quietly in the kitchen, preparing a small breakfast from the dwindling supplies. The children, Emily and Tommy, were awake, their faces bright with curiosity and energy that had been missing during the long winter nights. The farmhouse, though simple and cold at times, felt warm, not just from the fire, but from the sense of connection that had grown between them all. Samuel turned to Aeon as she placed bowls of porridge on the table. "You've done more than anyone could have asked," he said quietly. "We survived the worst of winter because of your help." Aeon shook her head, a faint smile on her lips. "We survived together," she said. "Your children, you and I, we all played our part. That's why we made it." Samuel nodded, realizing the truth in her words. Survival was never about one person alone. It was about trust, cooperation, and facing hardship together. The storm had tested them in ways he could never have imagined, and they had emerged stronger, more resilient, and closer than before. After breakfast, Samuel decided to take stock of the farm. He walked outside with Aeon, boots crunching in the thick snow. The fields were frozen and silent, the fences dusted with frost. Yet there was a sense of quiet renewal in the air. Nature, harsh as it could be, had also given them a chance to survive, to learn, and to grow. "We need to plan for the rest of winter," Samuel said, his breath visible in the cold air. "Supplies are low, and another storm could arrive. We'll need to ration carefully and make sure the animals are well fed." Aeon nodded, scanning the fields with him. "I can help," she said. "We can make a list of what's needed and how to manage it." Together they worked, checking on the animals, organizing the food, and preparing for the days ahead. Emily and Tommy followed, helping carry small bundles of firewood and checking water supplies. The children had learned so much in the past days, lessons of courage, responsibility, and cooperation that would stay with them for a lifetime. As they worked, Samuel realized how much he had come to rely on Aeon, not just for labor, but for her insight, calmness, and courage. She had arrived in desperation, yes, but she had remained out of loyalty, empathy, and a shared sense of humanity. That had made all the difference. By afternoon, the farmhouse was secure, the animals safe, and the food organized. Samuel felt a rare sense of relief. The storm had tested them, yes, but they had faced it together. And in that shared struggle, they had discovered something deeper than survival, a bond that went beyond words. As evening approached, Samuel gathered the children by the fire. "We've been through a lot together," he said, his voice soft but steady. "And we've learned something important. Strength isn't just about facing the cold or finding food. It's about working together, trusting one another, and protecting those who depend on us. We survived because we relied on each other." Emily smiled, looking at Aeon. You helped us so much, she said. You kept us safe. Aeon's eyes softened and she knelt to meet Emily's gaze. You helped me too, she said. Even if you were scared, you did what you could. Courage comes in many forms. Tommy, too, looked up at her, his small face serious. I want to be brave like you, he said, even when things are scary. Aeon smiled warmly. You already are, she said. Bravery isn't about not being afraid, it's about acting even when you are. Samuel felt a swell of pride in his chest. His children had not only survived the harsh winter, but they had also learned the true meaning of courage and compassion, and he knew that Aeon had played a vital role in that growth. As night fell, the last light of day filtered through the frosted windows. The wind outside was calm, but the farmhouse glowed warmly from the fire. Samuel, Aeon, and the children sat together, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. Samuel realized that this winter had changed them all. Aeon had entered their lives as a stranger in need, and she had stayed to become a part of their small family. Her courage and kindness had strengthened them, and in turn, they had shown her that trust and compassion could survive even in the harshest conditions. Later, as the children slept peacefully, Samuel and Aeon sat near the fire, speaking softly about the days ahead. You've given us more than just help, Samuel said quietly. You've shown us what courage and resilience really mean. I can't thank you enough. Aeon shook her head. You gave me shelter, food, and trust, she said. You gave me hope when I had none. We helped each other survive. That's thanks enough. Samuel nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The storm had tested them, yes, but it had also revealed the strength of their hearts and the value of human connection. He realized that survival was not just about enduring hardship. It was about learning to trust, to care, and to find hope in the darkest times. The next morning, Samuel went outside to survey the fields. The snow had begun to melt slightly, and the animals were moving more freely. He felt a rare sense of peace, knowing that the immediate danger had passed. Aeon joined him, carrying a small basket of firewood. The world feels calmer now, she said softly. We've made it through the worst of winter. Samuel nodded. Yes, but we'll stay prepared. Winter is unpredictable and we need to remain vigilant. As they walked back to the farmhouse, the children ran ahead, their laughter echoing through the snow-covered fields. Samuel watched them, feeling a quiet sense of pride. They had endured hardship, faced danger, and learned the true meaning of courage. And in the center of it all was Aeon, whose presence had transformed their lives in ways he could not have imagined. Over the next few days, they settled into a new rhythm. The storm had passed, but the lessons it had taught remained. Samuel, Aeon, and the children worked together, shared stories, and strengthened their bond. The farmhouse, once a place of struggle and fear, had become a haven of warmth, trust, and hope. Samuel realized that life could be harsh and unforgiving, but it could also be filled with kindness, courage, and connection. Aeon had arrived in desperation, seeking shelter and warmth, but she had given them much more: her strength, her wisdom, and her unwavering determination. And in return, they had offered her trust, safety, and a sense of belonging. On the morning of the first clear day after the storm, Samuel stood by the window, watching the sun glint off the snow. Emily and Tommy were outside, helping Aeon feed the chickens and gather firewood. The scene filled him with a quiet sense of hope. They had survived the storm together, yes, but more importantly, they had grown stronger, wiser, and closer as a family. Aeon approached him, brushing snow from her coat. The children are happy, she said softly. And you're smiling again. That's a good sign. Samuel nodded. Yes, we've learned that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about caring for each other, trusting one another, and finding strength in unity. This winter has shown us that. Aeon smiled faintly. And we've all changed because of it, stronger, braver, more connected. Samuel looked at her, gratitude evident in his eyes. You've given us hope, he said quietly, and I'll never forget it. For a long moment they stood in silence, watching the children play in the snow. The storm was gone, the danger had passed, and for the first time in months, the farmhouse felt like a true home. Samuel realized that life would continue to be hard, that winter would bring more challenges, and that the world outside remained unpredictable. But he also knew that they were ready to face whatever came next together. Aeon, once a stranger seeking shelter and food, had become a part of their lives in ways that words could not fully express. She had shown courage, resilience, and kindness, and in doing so had earned a place in their hearts. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, casting golden light across the snowy landscape, Samuel felt a deep sense of peace. The storm had tested them, challenged them, and changed them. But through it all, they had discovered the true power of trust, compassion, and human connection. In that small farmhouse, surrounded by snow and silence, Samuel, Aeon, and the children faced the future together, ready for whatever trials lay ahead. They had survived the winter, yes, but more importantly, they had survived together, with courage, trust, and hope lighting the way. And for the first time in a long while, Samuel allowed himself to believe that life, even in the harshest conditions, could hold warmth, safety, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow.